The game Red Dead Redemption 2 has a humongous map that spans over 5 different fictional states in the US. These states are massive, so it's no surprise that there's plenty of different towns and settlements across each of them, all having their own unique theming and, to put it simply, characters that make them up. Today, I want to review and rank each of these places to find out which town is the best to hang out in, rob, pew pew, and everything else a law-abiding citizen would get up to in their day-to-day life in a Red Dead town. RDR 2 has quite a few settlements, but I'd only consider a few to be part of the core towns that make up the game. The main way I'm going to be deciding if a settlement should be part of the tier list is if its display text on the map is a big bold black like you're seeing on the screen right now. Places like Emerald Ranch and McFarland Ranch won't be included in today's tier list because they show up on the map like this, which, at least in my opinion, shows that the devs consider the town to be less significant and not as important, as there's less emphasis on the location in the map itself. The towns that we will rank today are as follows: Tumbleweed, Armadillo, Blackwater, Strawberry, Valentine, Rhodes, Denis, Van Horn, and Annesburg. Anyways, now that we have that figured out, pull out your mapping quill and let's rank these towns. First up, we got the farm stock town, Valentine. Valentine is one of my absolute favorite towns for so many different reasons. For one, it's very friendly to new players, ensuring that they don't get lost, as it has a very easy layout to remember, with most of it just following 1 or 2 lines. Another thing that's excellent about Valentine is that it has every core shop you would need in a town. It has a gunsmith, doctor, general store, 2 saloons, and a stable, which is absolutely fantastic. The only other town to have all 5 of these is Denis, and it would be very sad if it didn't, considering it's more than 3 times the size of Valentine. We can't forget, Valentine also has a lot of different interesting NPC interactions, like the prostitute killer, the O'Driscoll hideout in the back of the doctors, the 2 weirdo dudes who want you to shoot bottles off of their heads, and even my boy, aka the GOAT, Mickey, the sweet homeless vet. Each of these missions and more all add so much life into Valentine when you're walking around, whether it just be into a shop, to your next mission, or just taking a stroll through the muddy streets. Lastly, this town also has some very fun missions in it, like the Lenny Saloon mission, the bar fight mission, and even the shootout at the end of Chapter 2. This town is definitely in my top 3 towns of all time, so I'm giving it an S tier. Next up, we have the tourist town Strawberry. This town is one of the smaller towns in the game, consisting of a more cozy log cabin town sort of vibe. I really like the aesthetics in Strawberry, with the river going through the middle of it, with several water wheels connecting to the buildings and bridges that are made through the town. I also like the little backstory, with the mayor and his shady business tactics, along with his supposed secret affair with the hotel owner. Honestly, I don't think I can come up with too many drawbacks for this town, other than maybe its lack of core shops being present, but other than that, I can't really complain. That being said though, there aren't too many things in this town either that I'd really say makes this town excellent, other than the backstory I just mentioned earlier. Overall, I think Strawberry definitely isn't a bad town, but I wouldn't call it amazing by any means either though. I'll put it towards the top of B tier, because although it is kind of basic, I would say it's a little better than your average town. Up next, we now have Annesburg, the coal mining town. This town is so depressing, and probably the saddest town in the entire game, other than maybe Armadillo, which we'll get to at a later point in the video. This settlement is barely even a town, as it only has a few houses and a gunsmith, along with a mandatory postal office. The majority of Annesburg is just coal mines and train tracks, making it kind of difficult to navigate through the town. The people here are also really depressing and very rude. Plus, they spend the majority of their time just mining and transporting coal. Not to mention, they're covered in this stuff. I want to find one good thing to say about this town, but I really can't. I think the place is just too different from an actual town, and it's almost like a big production plant or factory with only a few people living in it. I usually never visit this town unless I absolutely have to, and sometimes I even purposefully avoid it just because it sucks to be in. Really, the only thing stopping me from putting this town in the F tier are the missions that take place around this town, as some of them are absolute bangers. This town is going at the very bottom of C tier, only hanging on by a thread. Next on the list, we have the ghost town, Armadillo. Now, before I start hating on Armadillo, keep in mind I'm only ranking it based on its appearance in the second game, not the first. Anyways, with that out of the way, Armadillo fucking sucks. Before its glow up in RDR 1, Armadillo is currently being swept by a plague in RDR 2. This has led almost all of the NPCs to leave Armadillo, or at least at the very least, lock themselves in their houses, effectively making the place a ghost town. The only core shop that's open is the general store. They do still have one saloon open in the place, but it's definitely one of the most depressing bars in video game history, because there's usually only like a handful of people in there, and most of the time, they just mope around. Along with all of this, there isn't a single mission that takes place in the town, at least that I know of. And if there is, it's definitely not memorable, because I don't remember it. I will say though, the lore as to why Armadillo is going through its plague is very interesting. The small number of people who still roam around Armadillo talk about a curse that was casted onto the town, with it being the reason why the town fell under a plague. Not only that, but apparently it was believed that the strange man from RDR 1 was the reason why the curse was being placed in the first place, which I also found pretty cool, and also a fun little callback to Red Dead Redemption 1. Other than this cool little backstory to the town though, it's not really a fun place to be, nor is there even really a reason to come here in the first place, so unfortunately, I'm gonna have to put Armadillo in F tier. Next on our list, we have the trading town Van Horn. This town is actually very unique in the fact that it doesn't actually have a local law enforcement. Instead, if a crime is committed in Van Horn, the citizens band together to take down whatever the threat or criminal might be, which I think is pretty awesome. It's such a small detail that some players might not even notice, but I think the feature is pretty cool, and it says a lot about the relationship that the people have with each other in the town. I also like the little side mission that takes place in the town, with Bertram and Magnifico as well. They have a pretty hilarious storyline that kind of helps you get through some of the more depressing parts of the game. Another funny thing about the mission that a lot of players don't actually know is that you can actually go and see their show in Saint Denis after you completed the side quest, and I found it very hilarious. As for the shops though, Van Horn doesn't really have a single core shop, which kind of sucks because you can't really buy anything here. With that said though, this is a pretty cool place to just go and goof around in or get in the fistfights with enemies if you want, giving this place a high B tier. Subsequently, we now have the Meadow Town, Rhodes. Although the people of Rhodes are kind of really racist, and some of them are also pretty crazy, seeing random people like Gavin's friend just wander around adds some entertainment to your little strolls around Rhodes. Another guy I like is the vet dude that hangs around this corner store in the town. He seems like a pretty chill guy to come across, and you can just have some conversations with him about just general things, and also some history behind Rhodes and Lemoyne, which is pretty cool. As for the shops in Rhodes, the place has a gun store and a general store in it, which covers most of the things you would really need to buy for your exploration, only really missing a stable. In terms of the missions that take place here, there's quite a few that are fun, ranging from a bar mission with Hosea, and even a shootout at the end of the chapter where poor Sean gets shot. One thing I do kind of dislike about Rhodes, even though it really doesn't have anything to do with Chapter 3 in the town, is that you can't shoot or commit any crimes in Rhodes for the majority of Chapter 3, which is a little bit unfortunate. It is just a story mechanic though, and has less to do with the town itself and more with just like the story, so I'm not going to have it count too much for its placement on the tier list. In all, I think Rhodes should get an A tier because it does have a good amount of content in it, along with a gunsmith and a general store for covering the bare necessities a player might need, landing it in A tier. Next on our list, we have the western town Tumbleweed. This town actually has a massive glow up from the first game, as it's actually not abandoned anymore and has actual citizens living in it instead of just a gang of criminals. With that being said though, the town is still pretty small and there isn't too much to do in Tumbleweed. In terms of missions, the only thing you can really do at Tumbleweed are a handful of bounties, and in terms of main quests, none of them take place in the area. As for shops, it has the same exact thing as Rhodes, having a gun store and a general shop, along with a saloon as well. Although technically speaking, this one doesn't have much, I still think it's alright. It has that western feel to it, with the town being in the middle of a desert, along with the designs of the building just having that sort of western theme. I think Tumbleweed is less of a location you go to for like side quests and like to buy things, but more of like a place you go just for the experience. There really isn't any other town in Red Dead 2 that has the same emphasis on a traditional cowboy western town like Tumbleweed does, which is why I'm really glad they decided to restore it and add it into the second game. I think in all, even if the town is missing some stuff, and it is somewhat small, it still deserves at least a B tier. As we walk into the smoke-filled skies of eastern Lemoyne, we now have the city of Saint Denis. Saint Denis is by far the largest location in the entirety of Red Dead's history, and it does not disappoint. Not only does the city have every single core shop in the game, but it also has places like a movie theater, a barber shop, a bar, and even more. If you can think of a type of shop that you can find in a different town, you can most likely find it in Saint Denis as well. This place has so many different missions take place here, whether it be just electrocuting some random criminal in a chair, or shooting up the entire town while riding away on a trolley. Even when the main chapter that the city takes place in is over, you're still coming back here to do more exciting stuff like executing Como Driscoll. Even when you're just walking around, there's plenty of things to do, like just doing some of the things I said before, or going to some random mini games that are on the side of the streets, like dominoes or blackjack. There's also just so many NPC interactions here, like the robber who bumps into you and tries to take all of your money, or the dozens of other people who are also being robbed on the side of the streets, who you can choose to help if you want. After all of that, if you're still bored, you can just go down to the docks and try and start fistfights with the people there, or try and take in the entirety of Saint Denis police force at once. I think it's safe to call Saint Denis the everything town, and there's always something to do here, which is why it's undoubtedly going in S tier. Lastly, but definitely not least, we have the lake town Blackwater. Although this town might not be as big as some of the other towns or have as many missions that take place in it, it's still definitely my favorite location in the entire game. For one, I think the whole story of the Blackwater Massacre is amazing and adds so much interest into an already amazing town, as it shows us how deadly Dutch's gang is, but also gives us a definitive starting point for when he and the rest of the gang kind of starts to fall apart. I also like the little Landon Ricketts reference / Easter egg that they have in the backstory as well, and how he might have been at the event. In terms of core shops, Blackwater does only have a general store and a stable, but it has so many other good places like a theater, clothier, saloon, and even more. Just like Saint Denis, there's usually something to do here. Also, something that I don't really think is brought up enough is Blackwater's amazing view. This place has a whole lakeside view where you can see tropical islands, riverboats, and even partially Saint Denis, especially at nighttime, which is really awesome. I don't know if it's just personal bias or not, but if I'm playing online with some of my friends, or just walking around as John, I usually catch myself going to Blackwater a good majority of the time, just because it's such a great place to be at and hang around. Overall, this place is definitely my favorite town out of all of the towns in Red Dead 2, and probably even Red Dead 1, so I'm definitely putting it at the very top of S tier. That's it for today's video. I really enjoyed making this tier list because I never really put that much thought into how much I liked each town, except for Blackwater. If you want to see more Red Dead videos by me, let me know in the comments, or if you want to see me cover another game, also let me know as well. Also, if you liked today's video, make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, adios.